The crowd pressed in, screaming like wild beasts. Amid the roar, a noose swung in the air, and at the end of it was the tall figure of an Apache woman. Takina, her skin was sun-darkened. Her bare feet kicked helplessly, and her face strewn with dust, still carried an air of unyielding pride. The rope left a harsh mark around her neck. Yet her deep black eyes stared defiantly down at the crowd as if to say, "I am not afraid of you." On the wooden platform, Judge Malcolm Avery, a man in a black robe and a white cravat, raised his hand and declared in a flat mechanical voice, like a verdict, long predetermined, "This is the fate of a traitor. An Apache spy must die so that the law may have peace." The crowd roared in agreement. Rocks and bottles flew through the air as dust rose like a storm. At the edge of the square, a lone figure leaned against a fence post. Elias Boone, a rancher who had lived alone on the frontier for 8 years, stood still as a statue, but his steely gray eyes were fixed on those feet, still struggling in the air. In that moment, he knew she was not dead. Hot wind lashed across the square, carrying with it the scent of smoke, sweat, and injustice. Elias clenched his fists, his heart pounding like a war drum. He had not come here to interfere. But now the choice was no longer his to make. Elias Boone was not one of the crowd. For the past 8 years, since the day a plague took his wife and child, he had chosen to live far from the town of Deadwood Crossing on a small ranch nestled into the hillside, where only the wind and an old horse kept him company. People said he was distant, hard to talk to, and maybe they were right. Elias rarely set foot in a saloon. Nor did he take part in the cruel jokes of frontier life. But this morning, when he rode into town to buy some salt and iron nails, Elias reined in his horse at a scene that weighed heavy on his heart. A woman being hanged. Not a thief or a murderer, but a young Apache woman, tall and strong, her hands bound behind her back, her body swaying from a rope. To the crowd, she was just another red-skinned savage. But to Elias, the image brought back the memory of a long-gone afternoon when his own father had been wrongfully sentenced by the very same law of the powerful. Elias gripped the bag of salt in his hand, his face cold as stone, though inside a storm was rising. People said that the law was justice, but he had lived long enough to know. The law belongs to the strong, and justice belongs to those brave enough to keep their conscience intact. As the crowd slowly dispersed, certain that Tina was dead, Elias remained, unmoving like an old oak rooted beside the square. His gray eyes never left the faint movement in the woman's chest. One breath, then another. She was still alive. In that moment, Elias knew his life was about to change. He could turn away as he had turned away from the world for 8 long years. Or he could step forward, cut the rope, and become the hunted. The shadow of Judge Avery had just vanished behind the gallows. Elias slowly placed the bag of salt on the ground. His callous hand rested gently on the handle of the revolver at his hip. His lips pressed together. The lines around his eyes deepened with quiet resolve. He had never gone looking for trouble. But this time, trouble had come looking for him. Deadwood Crossing Square was now nothing but red dust, the scent of sweat, and broken glass glittering under the sunday. The crowd had drifted off, some back to the saloon, others to their daily chores, leaving behind what they believed was a lifeless body hanging from the cottonwood branch. Only Elias Boone remained, his cowboy hat pulled low to shade half his face, eyes locked on the faint rise and fall of the woman's chest. He walked toward her slowly, each step crushing lines of dust beneath his boots. The creaking of the rope cut through the silence, drilling into his ears. A black crow perched on an oak branch cried out hoarsely like a funeral song. Elias said nothing. The hunting knife flashed in his hand, and with one swift, clean cut, the rope snapped. Tina dropped, her heavy body slamming into Elias's chest. He sank to his knees, still holding her tightly, keeping her head from striking the hard ground. Her breath, hot and ragged, hit his neck, carrying the scent of blood and dust. She was alive, but barely. "Do not let them." Her voice was dry and broken. Barely more than a whisper. "Hush, easy now," Elias replied, gently pressing a finger to her lips. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met his, a cold steel gray. Hers, deep and dark, both filled with scars only the soul could carry. He did not have much time. If Avery's men returned, they would kill them both. Elias hoisted Tina over his shoulder. She was tall but still fit securely in his weathered arms. He lifted her onto the back of his old horse, then threw a wool coat over her to hide the bruises. The road out of town burned like hot coals. Elias did not look back. Behind him, he could hear the murmurs begin. "Where's Boone going with that body? He's asking for trouble." Elias urged the horse into a faster trot. Dust trailing behind him like smoke. The sparse woods ahead opened into land that only he knew. His cabin sat tucked on a hillside where the wind howled through the trees and few people ever came. When he laid Tina down on the rough wooden bed, Elias saw the full extent of her wounds, rope burns carved deep into her neck, bruises along her shoulders, and feet scraped raw and bleeding. He brought cool water and began cleaning her injuries, his hands clumsy but patient. Takina opened her eyes and stared at him. "Why did you save me?" Her voice was faint. The words barely formed. Elias paused for a moment. His steel-gray eyes darkened slightly. "Because justice does not belong to the judge. And you did not deserve to die." Rumors in Deadwood Crossing spread like fire through dry grass. People whispered in the saloon, along the dirt roads, even outside the general store. Elias Boone, the lone rancher, had cut down an Apache she-wolf. Some called it madness. Others said he had betrayed the town. But no matter what was said, all suspicious eyes turned toward the small ranch on the hillside. Judge Malcolm Avery did not let the news pass without action. He was a man used to wielding power like a whip, and anyone who defied his rulings had to pay. One morning, 2 riders and long dusters knocked on the door of Elias's cabin. "Boone!" One of them barked. "Word is you are harboring an Apache spy. The judge wants the truth." Elias stood in the doorway, one hand resting on the wooden frame, his steel-gray eyes cold and steady. "It is just me and my old horse here. If you are looking for a spy, maybe you should try looking in a mirror." The words hit hard. The deputy's face darkened with anger. But instead of picking a fight, they spat on the ground and turned their horses away, leaving behind a cold warning. "Next time we are bringing fire, Boone, and you won't be walking away from it." Inside the cabin, Takina had heard everything. The rope marks still lined her face. But her eyes burned bright. "They will come back and not to ask questions. They will burn it all." That is how they spread fear. Elias took off his hat and sat by the doorframe. He knew she was right. 8 years of isolation had taught him how to avoid trouble. But this time, trouble had wrapped itself around his life like barbed wire. "Why do they hate you so much?" Elias asked, his voice low. Tina hesitated, then answered in a hoarse whisper. "They say I passed messages to Apache warriors, that I led them to the white settlers' camp. But the truth is, I was just looking for my sister. I was captured." From that moment on, the word spy was nailed to my name. Elias fell silent, his callous hands tightening into fists. He realized then that this woman was not just a victim, she was a tool, a scapegoat for Avery to tighten his grip on power. Night fell. The glow from the town lit the distant sky. The scent of smoke still lingered in the wind. In the cabin's dim light, Elias cleaned Tina's wounds. Their eyes met in silence. Outside, the storm had not yet come, but both of them knew it was only a matter of time. "Thank you so much for being here." If this story brings back memories of dusty afternoons and the sound of hooves echoing in your chest, then go ahead and subscribe to my channel so every day we can sit together and I will tell you another tale from the Wild West. The night wind howled through the valley, carrying with it the blistering heat of the dry season. Elias Boone's small wooden cabin sat in darkness, lit only by the crackling flames in the fireplace, casting shadows of 2 figures facing each other. There was no need for many words. Both Elias and Tina understood. Judge Avery's men would return, and next time they would bring the fire of destruction. Elias opened an old wooden chest and pulled out a rusted Winchester rifle and a few leftover boxes of ammunition. His hands were strong and steady, more used to mending fences than taking lives. But now, every skill from his younger days had to be recalled. He cleaned the barrel of the gun, each motion slow and deliberate. Takina was different. She stepped outside and sharpened wooden branches, planting them around the horse pen in rows like a barrier of stakes. Her forearms were corded with muscle. Old scars scattered across her skin under the moonlight, but she stood strong like a bronze statue. Elias watched from the window, quietly surprised by her fierce determination. "You work like a man," Elias said softly. Half a compliment, half a concern. Takina looked up, her dark eyes sharp. "I am not a man. I am Apache. And we learn to survive from the moment we can walk." A brief silence fell between them, broken only by the wind wailing along the hillside. Elias nodded, offering new argument. He picked up an oil can and began dousing the ground around the horse pen, attaching a fuse to a bundle of dry kindling. If they tried to set a fire, the explosion would scatter the horses and buy them time. When the preparations were done, the two of them sat by the fire on the porch. T's face was set like stone, but the flames dancing in her eyes revealed exhaustion beneath her strength. Elias handed her a steaming bowl of black coffee. "You could leave tonight," he said slowly. "If you take the northern trail, you'll be free." T shook her head. "No, I have run too many times. Tonight, I stay with you. I will fight." Her words left Elias quiet for a long moment. Something stirred in his chest. Something unfamiliar. It was more than the duty of saving a life. It was the feeling of standing together. They were no longer strangers, but two battered souls thrown together by fate. Now holding the same line, the moon rose high. In the distance, the sound of hooves echoed faintly like the drums of war. Elias Boone tightened his grip around the rifle. Tina slipped a dagger beneath her pillow. They both knew tonight this land would be stained with blood. The night in Deadwood Crossing burned bright like the gates of hell had been thrown open. From afar, the glow of torches lit up the dark sky, accompanied by the thunder of hooves pounding the earth. Judge Avery rode at the front, his black cloak whipping in the wind, his voice ringing out like a funeral bell. "Tonight, all who defy justice will burn." More than a dozen gunmen surrounded Elias's ranch. Torches were hurled into the horse pen and flames erupted with a roar. From the shadows, Elias yanked the fuse cord. A deafening blast tore through the night fire, devoured the rotting wooden roof, and 3 of Avery's men were blown off their feet. Screams and the shrieking of panicked horses echoed across the valley. In the chaos, Takina burst from the back door like a shadowed panther. Her dagger gleamed in the firelight as it slashed across a man's arm. Blood streaking in crimson arcs. She melted into the smoke, disappearing and reappearing like a ghost, terrifying the invaders with every strike. Elias stood at the front of the cabin, the Winchester thundering in his hands. Each shot precise, cold, final. With every pull of the trigger, one of Avery's men dropped, but they kept coming. The torches crept closer. Finally, Avery rode straight into the yard, revolver flashing in the firelight. "Boone, you chose to stand with a savage. Tonight, you die with her." Elias dropped the empty Winchester, drawing his Colt from his belt. The two men faced each other, the flames dancing in their eyes, one cold as steel, the other burning with hate. Avery fired first. The bullet grazed Elias's shoulder, spraying blood across his shirt. But Elias did not fall. He steadied his hand, pulled the trigger. Judge Avery tumbled from his horse and lay still in the red dust. The gunfire ceased. Avery's men scattered in panic, dropping torches and abandoning their fallen. The yard was silent now, only the scent of smoke, the taste of blood, and the heavy breathing of two souls who had stood their ground. Takina, her hair matted with sweat and blood, stepped toward Elias. She held him steady with strong arms, her dark eyes blazing beneath the dying flames. "You chose the hardest path," she whispered. Elias gave a faint nod, his breath ragged. "No, I just chose the right one." Dawn cast a pale golden light over the Deadwood Valley. The small cabin stood silently amid the lingering smoke of the horse pen, now reduced to charred ash. There were no more hoof beatouts, no more shouting, only the wind, carrying the scent of smoke into every crack of the wooden walls. Elias Boone sat on the porch steps, his shirt stained with blood, the wound in his shoulder still aching. He poured a bit of water from his canteen, let it run over the injury, and watched as the mixture of water and blood soaked into the dry earth. Tina stepped outside. Her hair was matted with sweat and smoke. Her face streaked with dust, but her deep, dark eyes burned bright. They sat in silence for a long time, as if listening for the beat of their own hearts after a night that had nearly taken everything. Then, Tina spoke, her voice, but steady. "Last night, they thought they could burn everything to the ground. But they do not understand. Fire only makes steel stronger." Elias looked up, the corner of his mouth lifting in a tired smile. He gazed out over the scorched fields, then turned back to her. "You are no spy. You are proof that the truth will never stay buried." Tina tightened her grip around the dull-bladed dagger, her hand trembling slightly from exhaustion. But there was light in her eyes, as if for the first time in years, someone had truly seen her for who she was. Inside the cabin, a new fire crackled to life. Tina set a pot of water on the stove. White steam curled into the air, mingling with the bitter scent of coffee that Elias had just brewed. Two people, two battered souls pushed to the edge. Now sat beneath the same roof, sharing a silence that no longer felt heavy but comforting. Outside, the sun was rising higher, casting light on the scars across the land and across their bodies. And yet, that same light signaled a new beginning, something both Elias and Takina had long believed was lost forever. Elias lifted his wooden cup gently toward her. "We are alive and we have a new day to start again." Tina nodded, her eyes glowing like embers just stirred to flame. The morning sun stretched across the rolling hills, revealing blackened scorch marks still scattered around the ranch. Elias Boone stood before the broken fence, his callous hand resting on a charred beam. He knew it would take days to rebuild everything, but to him this was more than repair. It was a declaration that the fire from last night had not consumed his life.